All right, welcome to episode number 70 of the Canadian Prepper Podcast. We're recording on May 31st, 2020. My name is Eric, I'm the host of the show, based in Southern Ontario. I'm a hunter, target shooter, ham radio operator, and computer geek. As a first responder, I've witnessed an over-reliance on emergency services during major events, and I started a small preparedness company to help people get better prepared for at least 72 hours, if not longer.
My name is Ian, and I live on Vancouver Island. I'm an outdoor enthusiast, sport shooter, and my farm is designated handyman.
And I'm Hugues from Nova Scotia. I am a Canadian Armed Forces veteran, volunteer firefighter and station chief, and also a volunteer search and rescue technician and prepper. I've been preaching and living the prepper lifestyle to varying degrees for the last 6 years or so, and this was born out of necessity for the short-term and long-term survival of my family, which includes 3 young children.
Hello, my name is Tyler. I live in Northwest Wisconsin. Besides prepping, I also enjoy homesteading, metalworking, engines, guns, and the great outdoors.
If you want to help support the show and keep the Canadian Prepper Podcast on the air, you can buy a Canadian Prepper Podcast t-shirt at rapidsurvival.com. All the proceeds go to keep the lights on and the backup generator fueled.
All right, if you're enjoying the show, please take a few minutes and like us on Facebook and submit a review in iTunes. Also, we want your feedback, good or bad, or if there's just a topic you want us to cover. You can email us at feedback@prepperpodcast.ca.
I'm pretty sure the email address still works, even though nobody's been emailing us.
Somebody should test it.
Yeah, please do. All right, so we've got some retreating content for you in this episode. First, we're going to start off with some preparedness-related news articles. Next, we'll let you know what we've done for our preparedness since the last episode. And then we're going to get into the main topic, tales from a 5-minute bug out.
All right, news time. I didn't have a whole lot because I figured Tyler had a lot to tell us about. So my only note today was that school's coming back for the kids in the local area here. Much to their chagrin, they have to go back for at least a day a week, if not more, thanks to the COVID. So that was it.
Interesting. So do you guys normally have summer off, or is this different school schedule because of COVID and everything?
Well, no, normally it's just, July and August are off, but they've been off since,
Right.
at least 2 months now. And so they were doing some online classes, and I guess they're going to try and I think stagger the class loads. And then so it boils down to 1 day per grade per week.
Okay, so they're doing some sort of summer schooling basically to try to catch up from the lost time.
Yeah, I guess just for another month or so. I guess I'm still gonna end at the end of June, so I don't know.
Okay,
I think so. My daughter in grade 12 basically has 4 days of school left.
Okay,
So
gotcha.
that was it.
I know here in Nova Scotia, there's only 1 week left, and then they're calling it quits for the rest of the year. So they basically get 2.5 months off, and then they're hoping everything's going to be normal in September, but it could be staggered, where you would have the lower elementary in the mornings, higher elementary in the afternoons. I just don't know what that's going to look like, depending on what the provincial regulations are at the time for COVID, right? So I'll wait and see, I guess.
Okay.
Well, even more funny is the fact that my older ones are going to university in the fall, and the university has already said they're going to be doing online classes for the entire first semester, including the labs, which makes me giggle. So I'm like, well, what's the point of university then?
Right.
Yeah.
Why am I paying the money? So, anyway.
Yeah, I guess, funny we talk about Corona a little bit because it seems it has basically disappeared from the news. I'm sure everybody by this point has seen kind of what's going on, what started in Minneapolis and then has basically spread to the entire country. So just a little background, I was born and raised in Minnesota, so I'm pretty familiar with the area. After buying my own house, I moved to Wisconsin, and I've been here for 3 years, but I live just about 40 miles away, and I work in North St. Paul, which is probably 10 miles from where all of this is going on. And we've been following it pretty closely since it really started to erupt on Tuesday, when the protests slowly kind of started to turn into less protesting and more rioting and looting. But this is all basically because of the murder of George Floyd by Minneapolis police officer. He was pinned on the ground for a number of minutes. I think everyone's probably seen the video by now, and it is pretty hard to watch. And I think everyone agrees that it certainly was police misconduct, abuse of power. It was essentially murder, is what it was. And the whole country agrees on that. So I'm not really sure why we're all rioting. I understand that voices need to be heard and everything. And I definitely empathize with those people. But what it has evolved to is truly tragic. And I'm not sure exactly how it has been painted on the kind of the national news media, but certainly from watching hours and hours every evening of Facebook live feeds and YouTube live feeds and everything else. It is bad down there, and it is nasty, and people are out there just to incite violence. And I'm kind of watching the news now. There's stuff going on as we speak. Let's say, so Monday night is when the incident occurred. Tuesday was relatively peaceful protesting most of the day and then into the evening. And I believe it was Wednesday afternoon when they finally started looting kind of the first Target building. And that was when things started to snowball and just devolve. So Wednesday night, there was a significant amount of burning and looting and violence that kind of snowballed again Thursday. And by Friday, it was total anarchy out there. There were dozens and dozens of buildings burning to the ground all at once. There was groups of hundreds of people roaming the streets, just smashing everything in sight and lighting everything on fire. They're dragging garbage cans, ripping things off of buildings, dragging them into the middle of the street, lighting fires, and just moving on. It really, the tone from the local media as well as the governor, it seemed obviously it's a very sensitive situation, racially speaking. It was a white officer and a black man, so there's reason to believe that it could have been racially motivated. From the video, there's not clear evidence of that, I guess. But obviously tensions are high. There's been cases of this in Minneapolis in the past, so it seems like this has been boiling for a long time. And it has just erupted into bad stuff. And the tone really changed Saturday morning. The governor came on at it was 1:30 Saturday morning when the guard was finally trying to think. The days have all mixed together. Let's see, today's Sunday, so Saturday. It would have been Friday night, so it would have been early Saturday morning at 1:30. The governor came on and gave another press conference, and the tone had significantly shifted. It went from trying to give people the opportunity to protest, and there was just simply a lack of numbers. They said they had brought, I believe it was 2,500 between National Guard and police officers the night before, and that was nowhere near enough to even quell any of the protesting. Really, they're basically just trying to protect critical infrastructure like the state capitol and some of the police precincts and so on. But by Saturday, like I said, that tone had changed. They fully enacted the National Guard. So Saturday evening, they had, I believe it was just over 5,000 National Guardsmen out there. And it sounds like the Minnesota National Guard holds about 14,000 soldiers. Not all of them are completely qualified or up to training to do stuff. But so there is some reserves there. And it seems like as things, I'm watching the TV now, things kind of starting to devolve again. They actually just had a full semi-tanker plow into a crowd of about 5,000 people. Thank God no one was seriously injured or killed. And that's been kind of the fortunate case with the riots ongoing. There's only been a handful of deaths, and those are all tragic, of course. But it seems like with the hostility out there, it could be much worse. And there's definitely some underlying tones coming from the governor the last 2 days that a majority of these people, especially in Minneapolis, are from out of state. They're not even from the region, and it appears that there's reason to believe that they're either domestic or international terrorists that are hell bent on just wreaking havoc and basically tearing society down. And that's been the kind of the scene the last few days. Like I said, the tone significantly changed. It would have been early Saturday morning, Friday night, Saturday morning at 1:30 a.m. So as the protest erupted Friday night, and the guard has really moved in now, and it sounds like there's over a dozen other states in the country that have also enacted the National Guard to basically keep peace. It seems like that's what they're attempting to do, and they've done a good job. As I watched them move last night, they are very methodical, and I mean, it's just tear gas after tear gas. Every few seconds, they're firing tear gas off, pushing crowds back, dispersing people.
I wish the media would cover, people banding together to clean up or banding together to defend businesses or else, but they seem to focus on the destruction and everything else. So, I mean,
absolutely.
There's no doubt that the person that did the what amounts to basically a murder is a shitty human being, regardless of colors involved. It's a shitty human being who's making his coworkers look like a bunch of jerks. And then you've got the media who are acting like a bunch of jerks, who are covering a bunch of people that are rioting that are really just a bunch of shitty human beings too. Like, because there's legitimate protests and there's like senseless destruction. Like, nobody in their local neighborhood is going to destroy their local business just because they're pissed off with somebody who did something to one of their neighbors, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot of, like you said, external forces going on there.
Yeah.
And whoever's promoting that, like, and I blame a lot of the national media for that, is like promoting the violence.
Yep.
Or trying to stir up a lot of the hatred. It's just not helping, right? I wish they'd actually do some feel good stories about it, because there's actually a lot of Instagram pictures and Twitter stuff about people cleaning up, and like doesn't matter color blind type of thing, people helping each other clean up the next day and everything else during the daytime. I wish they'd do more of that, but
absolutely. And the local reporters for at least local news stations have done a relatively good job of covering the kind of the media, I guess, unbiased, at least through this incident. And they have done a good job of highlighting that. And the city and the people of Minneapolis have really come together. Everyone is speaking out against this, the nonsense and the riots and the protests. And there still is good people out there. Even I was going to save it for the shout outs, but Main Streeters Pizza, it's a little pizza place in Star Prairie here, just a few minutes from us. They actually catered the food at our wedding. They put out a Facebook post last night because as the roads are closed, schools are shut down. There's children that were receiving meals from the schools, and of course, we kind of forget that this is all going on in the middle of a pandemic. So there was already people struggling to get the things they needed. And now with all this going on, there's even more. So just a little small town Wisconsin pizza place. They were able to fill 3 7-passenger vans completely full of food and supplies and another pickup truck, just with the local community here coming together. And I'm proud of my wife for donating over 100 bars of soap. And I'm proud of my community for coming together and trying to help out.
That's
so
awesome.
there is still good people out there. Don't lose hope. What you see on the TV is scary. But as I've watched every single night, I usually tune in about this time, 7, 8 o'clock, just as things go dark. There's a lot of peaceful protesting out there, and rightfully so, during the day. And as things devolve during the night, there are a select few number of individuals, groups of individuals that are out there wreaking havoc. And then as daylight breaks, there are swarms of people coming to the streets to help, literally walking down the streets with brooms and dustpans to sweep up glass and help out. So there is still good people out there.
I've seen some good news stories, I guess, coming out of those, and one was a police officer. I don't know if it was in Minneapolis or another U.S. city, but basically he had gotten separated from his other officers, and some of the, I'm going to call them the rioters or the protesters or whatnot, created basically a human chain. They interlocked their arms to kind of shield him and protect him from the other rioters that were trying to get to him.
Yep.
Until he can get back to safety, right? So, like they are out there protesting, they're making their voices heard. They're obviously pushing their cause and their agenda, but at the same time, they recognize that if it weren't for them trying to help this police officer, he would have probably been injured, or he could have been killed for all we know, right? Because it was him against a crowd of people, then you're just not going to win, right? So
yep. Yeah, and I kind of painted that scene. I wanted to show there is a distinction. There are a lot of good people in Minneapolis that are grieving and trying to do that peacefully, protesting, and it is a relatively small in comparison to the people out there that are trying to grieve respectfully. There's a relatively small, I don't even know what to call it, insurgents almost, of people that are really just wreaking or seeking to wreak havoc and nothing else. And
I wonder too if it's the media that's fueling this and fanning it, and they're showing us a lot of the bad stuff that's happening, but they're not showing us the good. Like, you really have to go out of your way to find those good news stories, and it's enlightening to see those as opposed to tuning into CNN and seeing their own headquarters being destroyed. Which, oops.
Yeah, I know.
Honestly, I think there's one good thing that came out of this. It was probably that.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the few I was not torn up about. So I guess that's been the situation here. I've been watching it closely. It's been disheartening to see, to put it lightly, I guess. But there is still good out there, and we will take back this country. Peace will be restored, whether it's by law enforcement or the great citizens of this country, just like it was done in its founding. Peace will be restored. We will get back from this. So,
thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Nice to get a perspective from somebody who's close to it, as opposed to
Yeah.
the three other people in this podcast being from Canada.
Mhm.
I mean, we're looking from the outside, looking in, right? So
We're watching a bunch of posers in Toronto protest a dubious hate crime at best.
yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
Shall we move into what we've done lately for preps?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I put in some raised garden beds. So I do have a larger garden where this year we're doing things like potatoes and pumpkins and squash and all that kind of stuff. But put in some raised garden beds. It's good fun for the wife and kids. It gets them more interested into gardening. It's closer to the house, so that's really kind of the main point. And it's easier for them to get some water to it and all that kind of stuff. So I really want to start teaching them and start getting them more involved in that. And that was a great way to start doing that. So we put that in today. I had to get some dirt, so I ordered 4 tons of dirt to get that done. I have plenty of dirt that I'm not sure what to do with now, but we'll figure it out. And then, as with the main topic of the show, I spent some time rethinking about my 15, 30, and 60-minute bug out plans. So obviously, if I only have a certain amount of notice, what are the things I'm going to bring with me? Obviously, kids and wife and all that kind of stuff. And then whatever else I can fit in that short amount of time, right? And then in order to support that, I've had to reorganize some of my prepper supplies that I would take with me if I only had 15 minutes or 30 minutes or 60 minutes. Because realistically, we're going to be talking about 5 minutes. And 5 minutes is just enough to, if for anybody who has kids, 5 minutes is enough to get, one kid in a vehicle, let alone 3. So praise to my wife for having done that in 5 minutes. But yeah, so that's what I've done. So I'll go over to Eric.
All right. For myself, I got to test out my power outage preps. So we had all of a sudden a pretty quick storm come through here with some pretty heavy winds and a ton of rain. Apparently in the area, a couple of trees came down on some power lines, and we were out for about 6 or 7 hours. I was able to sit back, relax, watch Netflix, and my little media server ran no issue, and yeah, everything was good. Didn't even realize that the power was out or that it had come back. The only reason why I could figure out the power came back is the kettle started to boil and a couple of the plugs in the kitchen don't work. And all of a sudden the kettle's boiling. I'm like, why is the main power's back. So yeah, the plans worked out well. I'm going to change a few things around just as far as OPSEC goes, because I realized that I am the only house on the street that has power when the power goes out. So I'm going to do a few things to kind of hide the fact that the lights are on and things are kind of running. But besides that, it was only 6 or 7 hours, so nobody was pounding at my door looking for anything, which was good. So that it was comfortable. Everything worked.
Yeah, because if they knew you had Netflix, somebody that was binge watching you pounding on your door, like, I gotta get the next episode.
Yeah. Oh my God, I'm almost at the end of the season.
Yeah. As for myself, I stacked wood. Doesn't sound like a whole lot, but it's actually, I've been, like I said, something normally I do in the fall, so I was busy doing that off and on, only like an hour here, an hour there. But I realized I won't have enough wood for next season, so I got to take care of that too. But I've been scrounging around the property for all the deadfall and stuff, and yeah, trying to do my best for that. Thanks to a local listener, I got in contact with a local ham radio examiner. So started doing some preliminaries with him to see how he could do it. And it sounds like he can test me online, so that's kind of cool.
Awesome.
Yeah. So kind of a dual feature. Things have been bugging me for a long time on the property, but also in preparation to maybe rent out or sell the property. We'd been, I guess, primping the property quite a bit last week or so. So that's been going pretty steady. I went out to Alberta to check out an ideal doomstead. Unfortunately, it was not so ideal. So it's so funny because I was talking to a couple other guys. They're like, does it have an artesian well? Does it have all the things you said we should look out for? And I was like, no. But I actually did find one that did have all that, but it was like way out of town. So it was not gonna work for me to get to work. But the one I did go out and see was unfortunately good up to a certain point, and then once you got past the highly, they used wide angle lenses. They kind of airbrushed a lot of stuff out in the pictures, and they forgot to mention the scads of rotted railroad ties, rotten farm equipment, and everything else that were in the back 40, and not to mention a RV that looked like a milk truck a RV and maybe like a cube van kind of had mad passionate hate sex, and then kind of came up with this RV that was like left in there for the last 30 years in the back 40. So I don't know how I was going to get that out, but
it's a mobile meth lab right there.
You passed up all those freebies.
Well, it was very, very much a Walter White special, and I was like almost afraid to look inside for fear I might find Jimmy Hoffa or something. So I was like, nah. Anyways, and so I unfortunately had to turn that one down. So anyways, the search continues. But
I see you organized your gun room as well.
Yeah, I got a PR here. Yeah. Here, I caught up on the doggy dentistry. So just before the COVID hit, one of my dogs had a rotten tooth, and actually two, it turns out. And we were going to get it done, and we kind of put it off, like we were preaching about people to keep up with their dental hygiene and everything else in order to not get caught behind in case something happens. Well, I didn't practice what I preached with my pets, and so it got to the point where like the dog had breath like a rotting sea bass for about 2 months here during the COVID. And so we finally got him into the vet because they had like some COVID procedures in place, and they kind of had they reopened. Anyway, so we got like 2 teeth removed and some other stuff done, and so that was kind of good. But that was, he is a guard dog and he has a job around here. So, yeah, it was kind of something we need to take care of. So we did. Yeah. And that was pretty much it.
Did they give you any advice to prevent that from happening again? We're going to be getting a puppy here in probably about a month. So I've got a dog already, but I've never had teeth issues with any of my animals growing up. So.
Well, normally we wouldn't, but I think because he has a variety of stuff that normally other dogs don't get a hold of, whether it be bare bones or, maybe he got a rock in his food or whatever, like just when he's out chewing on a rawhide or something. Sure. I think it was an accidental thing.
Okay.
And, like when they do go toe to toe with a bear, who knows, he could have slipped and fallen and bashed a tooth or whatever. I don't know. So,
okay.
Anyways, it was just one of those things where you could see the front tooth was like black, and obviously it was a problem.
Mm-hmm.
But it turns out the one that was causing all the smell was at the very back. We couldn't even see it, so they had to go in there, and he got some good drugs, so he was happy for a couple of days.
Nice.
Yeah, that was it for me.
Nice. For myself, so actually my wife, she went out and foraged quite a bit of wild asparagus, and we pressure canned that for the first time. We did 14 pint jars of it, so wow. It seems to be successful. So we're pretty happy with that, and looking forward to pressure canning the garden, which we also got planted just between yesterday and today. We got the whole garden planted. Also gathered some materials or substrates for mushroom beds. So I collected, went out, got some straw, some mulch, some wood chips, those sorts of things, and ordered some mushroom spawns. So we're going to plant a few mushroom beds here in the upcoming week. Talked about putting up some gates on the driveway last week, which I'm glad I did given the current circumstances. But I did a fair amount of regrading and stuff. So I was out there reseeding some grass, putting down some erosion control. It's pretty steep in spots strategically. So I also built a pig shelter, expanded the pig shelter, I should say. Took one of those large wooden pallets I talked about last week and put up a pig shelter. And then we picked up our feeder pigs just yesterday, and they are looking awesome and happy out there. And I couldn't be happier that we've got them on the property now, and they're settling in nicely. Like I said, we planted the garden, and then the last thing I did was pressure wash I got 2 like kind of small stoops or decks that lead up to the doors on the front of the house. So we pressure washed those off. They were getting pretty bad, and put a coat of primer and coat of paint on those and rebuilt the railings. So
there's no wrong answer, but do you name your pigs?
I've done that accidentally in the past, and I will not make that mistake again.
Lunch and dinner.
But even when they're not named, they got such personalities. I really do love raising pigs. They're just fun to watch root around and run around, and even not naming them, you still get attached to them. It's always difficult, butchering and processing an animal that you've raised, but that's what they're for, and just know that you've given it a good life. And
like I said, they have a bunch of really good days.
Especially a family cat, too.
Yeah. Well, it's just like, they have a bunch of really good days and just one bad day. So it's
exactly,
just,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
But, it's the same thing. With the chickens, we were kind of hesitant sometimes, but we had a few babies recently, and 2 of them are still unnamed. So we're trying to figure that out. I think we're waiting to see if they're boys or girls before we name them. So.
Yeah, it's a delicate balance, especially if you've got kids, which I haven't had to deal with yet, but.
Oh, actually, my kids are the most brutal ones of the bunch.
Oh,
They're the natural selection of the family. They just like, no, he's got to go, and he's going, and
come on, Dad, man up.
Exactly. So it's like, would you just take care of him, please? So yeah, no, it's actually the kids aren't even the concern anymore. So it's more like
Okay.
the old softie here. So
Nice.
All right. Well, shall we move into the main topic?
Yeah.
All right,
Hugues,
so-
run with it.
All right. So, so last Saturday, we had a forest fire in my area, which is something that that happened quite a few times. So 3 times in the last 12 years, this little area here has had a forest fire. This one ended up consuming about 145 acres, which is, there's much more. There's much bigger forest fires out there. I'm thinking ones like California and out west in Canada and all kind of stuff. But 145 acres in a small community that we're in is quite large. So long story short, around 12:30 or so, my wife was at the grocery store. I was home with 3 kids. I am a first responder, so I'm a firefighter, and I got the notification that there was a not really a forest fire at this point. It was more of a brush fire. And I can bring up some pictures for you guys if you want. So the ones like are on Facebook and what I could see as well. Just give me a second here. Sorry, I had it. The pictures will actually really tell a really good story of how big this was here. So give me a second. Can you guys? Okay, there we go. So I'll just go back here. Oh, I'll go forward. So that was the fire about 45 minutes from the point at which it started. So this was about 1:15 p.m. local time. Again, the call came in around 12:30 p.m. This was 1:15 p.m. We had very, very dry conditions for the last 2 weeks or so. The winds on this day were about 30, gusting to 45 kilometers an hour. So that's like 25 or 30 miles an hour. This was looking down the main 100 series highway. So this is the highway leading to where I live. You can see that the fire jumped the highway. Within about 25 minutes of the fire starting, it jumped the highway. We had a Department of Natural Resources helicopter on site pretty quickly. What they were trying to do is they were trying to douse this side where my mouse is here. They were trying to douse the right side of the highway in order to prevent the fire from jumping, because it has a lot of fuel available to it on that side of the highway versus where it started. Unfortunately, they were not able to do that because people were pulling over and getting their phones out and basically were directly in the way of the fire and the helicopters. And the helicopter pilots were unable to drop water for risk of dumping water on people and killing them because they carry 500-gallon buckets, which is 5,000 pounds of water. So they were unable to do that, and the fire managed to jump the highway and continue on the other side of the highway there. This is the local school, which is only about 4 or 5 minutes from my house. This is obviously going into the school. You can see that the fire was backing up onto the school. At this point, it was only about 400 or 500 yards from the back of the school. And this is a picture of the Sunday, so the day after, part of the area that it burned through. And I actually have another picture here of what it was when I was working within the fire grounds itself. So obviously you can see that most everything is burned. The ground is burnt, the trees are burned. So it did quite a number on the area there.
looks like a background of the Road.
What's that?
Like the movie The Road. It looks.
Yeah. So anyway, so basically, I was my wife was at the grocery store again. I got the call around 12:30. At first, we didn't think it was anything because I looked out to where the fire was, didn't see anything, so I didn't think it was that big of a deal. Kept going about my day, and then I walked by the same window about 15 minutes later, and I could see a large plume of smoke, and I was like, okay, we've got something on our hands here. So my wife came home, told me she drove by a bunch of fire trucks. I left. I went on scene, and I mean the fire went from maybe 2 or 3 acres to about 20 to 25 acres in the span of like 15 minutes. And this fire was being wind driven, and they said at that point it was moving about 6 meters a minute, and it was a dirty burn, meaning that there was areas that were basically burning just the ground, but it wasn't touching the trees. But then as it got closer to the highway, there was crowning as well, and crowning is basically that the tops of the trees are on fire, and through convection section, it will catch other trees nearby on fire. So you have the ground that's on fire, you have the crown of the tree, so the top of the tree that's on fire, but it doesn't touch anything else. And the problem with a dirty burn is that if the winds shift and the fire comes back and towards you, all that unburned fuel has now been dried up by the original fire that went through. And rather than moving 6 meters a minute, it's going to move 18 to 24 meters a minute, which is kind of hard to outrun when you're in the woods, right? So with that being said, my wife was home with the 3 kids. Originally, the fire was about 3 to 4 kilometers from her home. I was in the command center for a little bit of the time before I got tasked out to go into the woods. And that's when I overheard that they were going to be doing an evacuation of my area. So I called my wife. I gave her a 10 minutes heads up that there's going to be some police officers that are going to be coming through the area and evacuating them. And sure enough, within about 10 minutes of me calling her, a police officer came down our driveway and said, "You've got 5 minutes, pack your kids and go." So realistically, she got 15 minutes notice to pack up and go. If it weren't for my 10-minute call, she would have gotten 5 minutes notice to pack up and go. And unfortunately, as much as I prepare both, in process and in practicality, I wasn't there technically for my family to pack up and go. I was actively fighting this fire. If I could have probably left, but it's kind of leaving my post at that point, and I knew that my wife was capable of putting the kids in a van and going to her parents, which is only about 15 minutes away. And that area where her parents live is not within reach of the fire, because it would have had to jump a couple lakes, and that's just not going to happen, right? So that's that's kind of the short story version. She was given 5 minutes by the police, really 15 minutes because of the heads up that she got from me, but that's only because I was in headquarters when I heard that they were going to be evacuating the area which my home was in. So it really made me think about, I gave myself 60 minutes to pack up and go if I had to. And in this case, if I wasn't a firefighter and I got the 5 minute heads up, it changes the game a lot, because 5 minutes is just enough to get the cat, the 3 kids, the wife in the truck and out. Mm-hmm. I can't hook up my trailer. I can't pack the trailer. I can't take clothes. I might be able to grab my laptop, and that's about it, right? Really realistically, the kids, the cat, the wife, obviously they have to go. I'm not even sure about the cat, but the rest of the stuff in 5 minutes, I'm just not going to be able to do it. I'd probably forget to grab my wallet or my phone or something within those 5 minutes, understanding that I'm given 5 minutes because of the fact that there's imminent danger within the area, which is a forest fire at that point, and I just have to be able to outrun that. And I've got 2 avenues of exit, one of them being blocked by fire, the other is the only way out. So
yeah, I think with some animals, all you can do is just leave the front gate open or leave the back gate open or something for them to have an escape, and that's about all you can do. Especially if the cat's playing silly bugger, doesn't want to come, right?
Right.
It'd be like, I think I'd call it maybe once, maybe twice, and then be like, "Okay, you're on your own." Yeah.
Right. And basically, so at that point, my wife went to her parents. We fought the fire all afternoon. I ended up staying. So in the world of firefighting, we don't fight for fires at night because it's dangerous to be in the woods at night, obviously. So from about 9 p.m. to about 6 a.m., we went into structure protection. So what we were doing is that we were going from home to home, ensuring that the fire, wasn't about to encroach onto a property, and if it were, then we would have set up some water to protect the home at that point. So that's what we did till about 6 a.m. On Sunday morning, and then thankfully the fire was mostly out by that point. There was just a lot of hot spots that they had to hit and all that kind of stuff. And then we were able to return to our homes Sunday night at some point. I think it was like 9 p.m. or so.
So were you guys?
Was there any houses lost? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was going to ask the same question. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, there's no homes lost whatsoever. I think it was one vehicle that was burned, and then there was one property that suffered some damage to some excavating equipment, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, there's no homes lost, no lives lost, no firefighters, no civilians injured. I believe they do know who started the fire. It was a gentleman whose home was on the same road as mine, and there was a burn ban that day, so you weren't allowed to burn at all just because of the conditions that we had. But I believe, from what I've heard, that person had been drinking and decided to burn some brush he had on his property. Got out of control pretty quickly, obviously with 30-kilometer winds gusting to 45 kilometers an hour. Didn't have a cell phone to call 911. Went down to help tell his wife to call 911. By the time he came back, it was just out of control at that point. So that's not official. That's just what I've heard from bystanders and whatnot. But yeah.
Wow.
Oh, it's crazy.
Yeah, so it's changed the game for me a lot, just because being given 5 minutes is not ideal. And as much as you want to prepare, and as much as you want to have processes in place and all that kind of stuff, realistically, the police gave us 5 minutes. If I were here and I felt as though I was comfortable with 15, then I would probably give myself that, because at that point the cops are busy notifying other people, so I don't think they're going to be really timing you. But at the same point, they're giving you 5 minutes because of the fact that there's imminent danger, and you have to be out of there. So, unlike something that I typically prepare for a hurricane, I mean, we can see hurricanes coming for days and days and days. So we're given ample time to prepare for that stuff. Same thing for snowstorms. I mean, we might lose power, right? But when it comes to a forest fire that's encroaching on your property, the speed at which these move, I mean, this was a slow one at 6 meters a minute, but if it's a fast moving fire at 24 meters a minute, it's covering a lot of ground really quickly, and you have to be out of there. So yeah, so it's changed the game, because I typically thought I always had about an hour to pack the trailer, hook up the trailer, get the kids and the wife in the truck and all that kind of stuff. And, now I really realized that I could just have 5 minutes. So
I wanted to ask just a couple of questions about actual, I guess, forest fire, wildfire, kind of how they operate. It seems like you obviously have probably the best insight. So, let's say the forest fire on the scale of what you saw was encroaching on your house. Obviously the speed at which it's moving is going to dictate how fast it gets there, and that's going to be driven by the wind conditions and the ground conditions and so on and so forth. But the vegetation in that area looks very similar to what you would see in Minnesota, Wisconsin, really all across the Midwest. How close would that fire need to be before you start to see your siding melt and things like that?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So we typically see homes get damaged or destroyed for two reasons. One, you have the convection of the heat of the fire. So, I mean, if your property is close enough to the woods, I'm talking probably 100 to 150 feet or so. I mean, a good forest fire is going to burn, close to 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, right? So the convecting heat off that fire, a house like mine has vinyl siding. It has asphalt shingles, all really nice combustible materials. I mean, it's my home is what we call a lightweight construction home, which means it has laminated beams in the attic, which are extremely strong, but as soon as they're exposed to heat, they fail extremely quickly, right? So this is typical of your newer construction, like R2000 homes and all that kind of stuff. So convecting heat from the fire will definitely melt the siding, and then that will catch other combustible materials on fire. The other thing is that you'll have embers coming from the fire, because basically these large forest fires generate their own weather systems, and in doing so, they generate their own winds and all that kind of stuff, and they'll send embers onto your roof, and basically that's all it takes is for one ember to hit the top of your asphalt roof. It goes through to the tar paper, and then it goes through to the plywood, which is just glue and wood strips, and then that's it, and then your house is gone, right? So.
Yeah. So I know a lot of people will set up sprinklers, start hosing down the roof. I assume that's to mostly protect from those embers. Is that, in your experience, effective at all? Or
it is effective if you have a sustainable water source that can do it. Like for myself, I'm on a well, so I can draw realistically maybe 4 gallons a minute out of that well for maybe an hour, and then it's gonna run dry at that point, right? So that doesn't give me a whole lot of water. And the nearest water source, like there's a creek that runs right by my property, but because we've had 2 weeks of dry weather, that creek is dry, right? If we have 1 or 2 days of rain, it's going to be full and it's going to run for a few days. But I mean, on the day that the fire happened last Saturday, I had no access to water other than my well, and my well will not be able to supply a sprinkler system to do my house. Now, there are some people that will buy like a gas powered water pump that can supply, like, your talking probably about 1,500 gallons a minute of water, and then they'll have a sprinkler system that is a number of heads that will actually spray the woods or spray your house. So either way you want to do it, you're actually wetting down the property. You're introducing a lot of moisture, and that will be effective in reducing what embers could do to your house and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's a really effective way to do it. But I mean, trying to fight a forest fire with a garden hose, and trying to get all the embers, it's just time to get out of there.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Just go.
Yeah.
Right.
I've got 3 different ways to ask the same question, but bear with me for a sec here. So, so as a general rule, like I know because every fire is different and the speed at which they move and so on and so on. But I guess it's a combination of like how close was the fire before the evacuation was ordered, how close did the fire get to your house, and like is there like a preset kind of like plan as to when the cops are saying, okay, now we got to go and give everybody 5 minutes notice? Like how do they actually decide on that?
Yeah, so good question. So the fire, I think the first one was how close was it to my house before the evacuation got ordered. At that point, it was probably around 3 kilometers, which is what, probably 2.4 miles or something.
That's surprisingly close, right? And you said
it is, but it started surprisingly close. So it started
yeah.
probably 4 kilometers away. So by the time he had moved 1 kilometer, and they knew the direction in which the fire was traveling, because I mean it was basically a windswept fire, they knew that okay, if this jumps the highway, there's a lot more fuel on the other side of the highway, and there's a lot of homes on that side of the highway. So their concern at that point was basically the next real fire break is called Mill Lake, which is just across the street from me, which is where the helicopters were pulling the water out of. So basically, they knew that they had to proactively work on getting that area evacuated, and they actually did like a 6-kilometer stretch of road, and they were further contemplating another 10 or so kilometer stretch of road that goes to the ocean. So we've got about 12 kilometers from my house to the ocean, and then obviously the fire can't go anywhere, right? So, but they did the first 6 kilometers. The fire got to about 1 kilometer of my house, so about 1,000 meter or 3,000 feet from my house is where the fire kind of stopped because of Mill Lake. So that's where it kind of ended. And then Ian, what was your third question? Oh, when did they decide to call the evacuation?
Yeah, like what triggers them to run around and give everybody the notice?
So it's a joint decision that is made between the lands and forest team. So they're the ones that oversee all the wildland fire activity. So they're really the experts as to where they think this fire is going to move, how fast it's going to move, and all that kind of stuff. And then looking at working with joint emergency measures or organization, that is basically made up of like the fire department, the RCMP, which is our national police force that does the policing out here, and they basically look and say, okay, this fire is moving at X amount at this rate. It's threatening these homes within the next hour or two, and at that point, they basically made the call to evacuate. And by the time they made the call to evacuate, I mean, there's only like 2 or 3 police cars in our area that patrol the area, but by the time they made the call, there was probably 20 to 25 police cars in the area that came from a lot of the other detachments. So they had enough manpower to go door to door and evacuate. I think it was almost 1,000 people, or like I think it was 500 homes or so, and almost 1,000 people. And they ran that evacuation. So those 20 or 25 cops ran that evacuation in less than probably 25 minutes or so,
wow.
which was quite good. And then they said there was only, so I don't know if it was a mandatory evacuation or not. That's still in question. But there was 3 people in the area of evacuation that remained in their homes, and police really didn't do anything about it. They basically said, you know what, if you want to stay, but if something happens, know that you're not our first. You're like, we're not going to come to your rescue because we've already told you to go, right? So these are people that were on the lake and had boats as well. So I mean, if it comes to that, just jump in your boat and go, I guess, right? So
that was one of my questions, because like I guess if the police are going to show up to your door and order you to evacuate with 5 minutes notice or whatever, do they wait per se and just wait to make sure you're actually leaving, or do they just give you the notice and move on to the next house? It sounds like just move on to the next house.
So they gave my wife the notice. I mean, she had already, because I gave her the 10 minutes. So as soon as I gave her that, she started to pack the van. She wasn't in a huge panic, but she was starting to pack the van, put the kids in there. And actually, when she was walking out of the house for the last time, walking to her van, is when I've actually got a video of it from my home security. You can see the police car like stop in the middle of the road, back up, come down her driveway and say like, you've got 5 minutes. And she's like, I'm on my way out already. So they evacuated the area, and they had police at first, and then Department of Transport vehicles blocking the roads in the roadblock. I could get back in because I'm with the fire service right, but residents were not allowed back in the area unless escorted by police. If you needed like medication, or if you forgot your pets or your wife or something, your kids, I don't know. But if you went to one of the roadblocks and said, you know what, I forgot my medication at home, the police would escort you back into the area. So it was relatively safe, but because the fire was still under control and not contained, they want to make sure that you had an escort if you were going back in your home for whatever, right?
So besides like the door-to-door contact, is there any sort of infrastructure in place to like dial home phones, send emergency alerts by region or location via text message or emergency alert system? Is there any sort of that stuff in place?
There is, yeah. So we do have like an Amber Alert system. I think it's called the Emergency Notification System, where it would go to every radio and television and cell phone and all that kind of stuff. In this case, they can do it by like, I think they can do it by like region, or by not area code, but the other one, the middle 3 digits there. Anyways,
by prefix, yeah.
By prefix, yeah. So they have a number of ways to do it, but in this case, they had a very targeted area that they needed to get out, and they basically just needed to go door to door to make sure that, and they were recording every door that they did not get an answer. So if they didn't make contact with the homeowners, they made a note of it, so dispatch could understand that, hey, we didn't make a note of this, and I think they were sending units back to those addresses in order to make sure that that the people were out. And from what I understood, they weren't nicely knocking on the door. They were like pounding on the doors to try to get people out of there, right? So, but yeah, we do have those systems in place. I think that the speed at which this was moving, they probably didn't have time to enact it, and they had manpower, they had boots on the ground. I mean, 20 to 25 police officers is quite a lot of manpower. So, like I said, they were able to effect the evacuation in less than 25 minutes, which is really awesome.
Yeah, it's quite impressive. Yeah,
it's moving a lot faster than the fire, let's say. So,
yeah.
Wow. So yeah, I guess you pretty much covered it off, but the family reaction seems to be pretty good. So I mean, they handled that one fairly well. But I imagine the average family isn't going to. They're going to take 5 minutes to get over the shock, let alone do anything. So
when the call first came in, I mean, I just for being fun and playing around, I yelled fire, and my kids were like, "Oh, fire, fire!" Because I'm a firefighter. So the kids were going to the window and all that kind of stuff, and we couldn't see anything at first, like I said. But then when my daughter, who's 6, saw the actual smoke, she started to panic, and she was like, do I have to pack? Do I have to take my stuffed animal? Do I have to take my iPad or my snacks? You know what I mean? Like, she was really thinking about the important stuff here, not her siblings, but so no, that, I mean, the kids took it well, because they had, I mean, they got to go to their grandparents, which, we've seen them a little bit because of the COVID-19 stuff, but we really hadn't been able to see them a lot. So, they got to spend the rest of the day there. They spent the night there. So, the kids were great. And again, this is only a 50-minute drive from our place, so it wasn't all that far. So the family took it well. And even, my wife being able to talk to myself, and then myself being able to understand where the fire is, what really is it encroaching on, is our home really in danger or not. And about 2 hours after the evacuation, I kind of understood that we're probably not going to lose our home, because by that point we had 3 helicopters dropping water on this thing. We had about 180 firefighters on site. Obviously, that our number one job is to protect homes and lives. Obviously, we don't really care about the woods, right? So whatever we can do to protect homes and lives is what we were doing. And about 2 hours after the evacuation notice went out, we had a pretty good understanding that although it was still not under control and not contained, that we were probably not going to lose any structures with this fire. So I think that was reassuring to her. But again, not everyone's going to have somebody who's a first responder or has access to that type of information. So not knowing if your house is going to be there or not when you go back is I can't imagine, right? So especially when you didn't get a chance to take all the stuff that you wanted to. So
cool.
Yeah.
Major takeaways for you?
Major takeaways, I think, obviously prepping for me is, I mean, I was kind of caught off guard by the fact that, again, I always thought I had 60 minutes, and then I gave myself other plans where I might have 30 or 15, but 5 was never something I really considered, because I understand that. I mean, when we're leaving the house with 3 kids, 5 minutes is like, that would be great. I mean, usually it's 10 to 15 minutes to get everyone packed away and stop screaming and fighting and just put your boots on and all that kind of shit, right? Sorry, stuff. So in reality, 5 minutes is not a lot of time, but the things I'm happy about are one, I mean, when it comes to all our family memories and documents and all that kind of stuff, all of the stuff that I have is backed up to the cloud. So there's local copies here. Like I've got a NAS that has all that information on it here, but all the important stuff like the pictures, the memories, and all that is backed up to the cloud. So realistically, if a fire swept through and burned the house to the ground, those things I already have a backup for. So, the insurance is for replacing the home and the physical property and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, it would suck, but we would get a new house and all that.
Mhm.
The other thing, I found was, and I'm drawing a blank now. So,
That's awesome. That's good takeaways for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I don't think you can plug for 5 minutes.
sorry. I actually, yeah. So I had a friend of mine who worked in insurance before, and they said, they were asking me what my plan was, and I said, I think I have like $1 million coverage on the house, which is basically the house and the property, or the house and the contents and all that kind of stuff. And they said that's great, but in order for the insurance to cut you a check, you have to basically describe what's in every room, and you're not going to be able to do that. You're not going to be able to remember everything you had, the size of your TV, and all that kind of stuff. So he said the best thing you can do is take your camera, go through your home, take 1,000 pictures. And when I mean 1,000 pictures, literally go in every room and take like 6 or 8 different pictures of the room itself, and then open every drawer. Take a picture of every model number and serial number of expensive electronic like computers and cameras and all that kind of stuff, and store that on your Dropbox. And if you do have a fire or something like that, you basically give that tip to the insurance, and they will have to go through and catalog everything that they see in the pictures. And then especially if you have a 55-inch TV, is it a 720p or a 4K? Because that's going to make a big difference in the price, right?
Yeah, there's $1,000 there.
Right. So if you're able to prove, that this is what you had, and again, I mean, I've got a desktop here, but is it a $300 Dell desktop, or is it a $3,000 gaming desktop, right? And unless you're able to prove that through what they can see as a remnants of the article or through receipts, you may only get $300 for that desktop when you paid $3,000 for it. So being able to, take pictures of the contents of the stuff that you own, opening up dressers to show, what's inside of them, opening up your toolbox just to show, this isn't just, Harbor Freight tools. It's, I've got some Snap-on tools in here, right? So that's going to make a big difference when it comes to getting that reimbursement. And although I've got $1 million in coverage, unless I'm able to prove what I had, I may get reimbursement for Harbor Freight tools instead of Snap-on tools, just for example, right? So, and that would suck. That would suck a lot. So that was a second takeaway. So I did that probably 2 years ago. And then anytime I buy something new of significant value, like a new TV or something, I'll basically just take the pictures out of the old TV, replace it with the new stuff so that it's kind of up to date. But I do have that. So if fire swept through the house, hand those 1,000 pictures over to the insurance agent. They're probably going to cry a little, and then it's going to take them a while to go through and catalog everything and cut me a big fat check. So,
I just make it fun for them. I would include a couple pictures of like a GIMP suit or something, just to see if they're paying attention. You never know. Or,
I thought you were going to say like a classic car. They're like, you had a '67 Mustang Fastback in the garage. Yeah.
It's
funny we didn't find a frame or anything. Must have melted, like
a military Humvee that was parked in the garage. Come on.
I'll take a picture of my screen with your gun room there.
Yeah, that's right. See, I got YouTube proof.
So I think those are the two biggest takeaways. Even if I have 5 minutes to leave the house, which obviously could happen, and I understand that now. Making sure the kids and the wife and everything are with me and gone. That's great. If the house were to burn to the ground, we have the memories, and then we have enough proof stored in Dropbox and some other place, because I don't trust just one backup service, that I could go to the insurance and be like, I want my check for $1 million, because between my home and between the contents, it's probably going to add up to close to $1 million. And that's going to make a big difference when you're trying to rebuild your life too, right? So
I think the big takeaway is 5 minutes is like no time at all. I'm just thinking as you were talking here, like as I sit here now, if I was given 5 minutes, I'm sitting here in shorts, barefoot, like comfortable, ready, basically ready to go to bed for the night. 5 minutes, it's barely enough time to get a pair of socks on, get my pants on. Luckily I keep those with all my phone, wallet. Like I think of a lot of people that just come in the door, they throw the keys here, the wallet goes in the purse, the whatever goes over there. And it's 5 minutes every morning, just trying to get out the door to gather up the keys in the wallet. And, it's just, there's no time at all. And And yeah, it just kind of.
And also, you got to think, like, we were home when this happened. What if we were in town, which for us in town is about half an hour away? The time between when the fire started to when evacuation was called was probably about an hour and 15 minutes or so. So if we were in town and we didn't have an ability to get back to our home because there was already roadblocks in place, then yeah, we've got the kids, but we don't have anything else. We don't have laptops, the cat, we don't have any of that.
Mhm.
So I would much rather have that 5 minutes than have no time at all, because if we can get the kids in the van, and if they give me 5 minutes again, I might take 10, I might take 15,
Right.
I might take as much time as I can until they come back and say, okay, you've got to go now, like we told you 15 minutes ago you had 5. So in that extra 10 minutes I might grab a couple laptops and tablets and things that are probably going to be expensive that I want back, right? Wedding pictures and stuff like that, right? So understanding where I'm going is 15 minutes away to a nice home that has food and all that kind of stuff. I'm not going to start packing dry food bins and stuff like that, right? So yeah,
the situation is going to certainly dictate exactly how much time you have. If it's a fire approaching, even if you're given 5 minutes, you can still kind of gauge a threat based on your own
right. To me, this is not really a regional emergency like a hurricane would be, right? This is a very localized emergency, and even if we didn't have family nearby, we could go to a hotel. So I'm not like thinking, oh, I've got to pack the tent, like we're going to stay in the woods. Like, no, we're not. We're going to go to a hotel, right? Like,
yeah.
So yeah,
especially it wouldn't be that long either. But I just learned I should start podcasting with pants on. So I mean, save me a couple minutes right there.
I wasn't going to call anybody on it. So
go for it.
So just because a majority of us on the panel are first responders, and I know a lot of our listeners are as well, you bring up a good point that we're going to be dealing with the situation and most likely going to be away from our families when the situation is happening, be it the fire that you had to deal with or any other major event that's happening. Has this changed anything in your preps as far as getting prepared or having them more involved in the exit strategies or the exit planning or anything like that?
It's a really good question. I've wrestled with that because my wife isn't into preparedness as much as I am. So it would kind of be a hard sell for her. And at the same time, I know that she's focused basically on the kids, right? If she has 5 minutes to leave, it's she's going to get the kids and she's going to go, and that's going to be it. So yeah, that's a really good question. I don't really know how to answer that. I mean, unless you've got a spouse who's into preparedness as much as you are, I think it would be hard. I mean, I could probably put a checklist together for her, but I think in times of an emergency, she's probably going to take that checklist and throw it right in the garbage can, right? Like, save my Snap-on, torque wrench. Like, that's not going to happen, right? Like, so I think that as a very competent adult, my wife is going to know what she's got to do to get out of there in 5 minutes, and her priorities are probably going to be in line with mine, right? So, but that does raise a good question of that, being a first responder and having to respond to an incident that your family is also affected by. That's really hard because naturally you want to leave the incident and go take care of your family. And I could have probably done that. There's enough people on site whose homes were not threatened by the fire that I could probably said, guys, listen, I've got to go home. I've got to take care of my family. I'll be back in half an hour. I don't think that would have been an issue. But at the same time, I didn't think the fire was encroaching on our property quite that much just yet that they had enough time to be out. So I think if situation was different, I would have hopped into one of the vehicles and made my way down to help my family get out of there. So, but there's times, that's a good point, Eric, that there's times when you wouldn't be able to do that. You wouldn't be able to get in a vehicle and just go help your family, right? You'd be stuck at the incident. So
that's something good to put in the back pocket for anybody listening, and that is doing the first responder thing. Kind of have that in the back of your mind as well, and a backup plan in case you're not able to be there.
Right. And I mean, it's not just that I was at the incident, I could have been hunting 2 hours away and this happened, and I wouldn't have had time to get back to my family, right? Or, sometimes I travel for work. So I could have, if it wasn't for COVID-19, I could have been in Ontario when this happened, a few hours away from my family, and they would have been left to their own devices again. So
that's a good point as well.
I am wrestling with the fact of how would I get her to be better prepared to do so, but at the same time, I think that with 5 minutes, there's not a whole lot you can do anyway, right? So
of course,
maybe I guess a checklist. I don't know, like just iPad, laptop,
even that.
kids.
Possibly the cat.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I think, even with like an hours, I don't know that she would follow a checklist, right? Again, it comes down to our priorities I think our priorities are aligned as in get the kids, obviously, right? But it comes down to make sure my XPS 15 is saved, like, or my PS4, should be able to let it burn.
Yeah, that's her silver lining right there. She's like, no more PS4.
Yeah. So.
I guess I had one last question. I was going to ask you kind of about, I see a lot of videos of like wildfires in California and stuff, and you see the vehicles driving out of that, and the fire trucks driving so close to the blazes and so close to the fires, and these huge raging forest fires are right along the edge of the road, and you can't even see in front of you. How long can a vehicle kind of sustain that heat? How is that just fire trucks that can do that kind of thing? I mean, at what point are you getting out of your vehicle or trying to find an alternate route? Can you lend any advice, I guess, to where do you risk it and where do you say, okay, this is not going to work in the car or whatever it might be?
Yeah, it's a really good question because I've seen, I think it was last year, there was like a Toyota truck that made it out of wildfire, and everything that was plastic on that truck melted. I mean, the headlight, the taillights, the mirrors were all melted off the truck. The paint was bubbling, but the truck made it out of there, right? So this is not an advertisement for Toyota trucks or anything like that, but it's just like your vehicle can probably go through a lot more than you think it can. But I have seen people say, if you're going to be going through, obviously put the AC on max because you're going to want that cab as cold as you can. Yeah. And by putting on max AC, you're putting on recirculate, which means it's not going to be grabbing fresh air from the outside of the vehicle to bring it into the vehicle. It's going to be recirculating the air that's inside the vehicle. So that's probably the number one thing, is to make sure that your air is set to recirculate, so that you're keeping that fresh air you've got in the cab within the vehicle, and you're not pulling smoky air from outside the vehicle. Other than that, I mean, it's I think it comes down to, if I had my pickup and I had to get out of an area like that, like proactively put into 4-wheel drive, because I mean, that's just those little things, right? So I think, max AC, 4-wheel drive, don't stop, just get out of there, right? When it comes to fire trucks, it's kind of the same thing. I mean, it comes down to the design of the vehicle, and most of these vehicles are like made out of aluminum, right? So there's not a lot of plastics on these things. It's mostly steel and aluminum, all kind of stuff. But they will get heat exposure pretty quickly. I mean, the windshields would actually, the windshields on most vehicles are laminated glass, and when they're exposed to heat, they actually become opaque, so you can't see through them, right? So when you start seeing the opaqueness kind of build into the windshield, you know that you're being exposed to a lot of heat, and you're about to lose the ability to see. And if it's that hot, sticking your head out the window to see where you're going is not going to be an option. Right? So,
well, that's some really good insight. I didn't think about that. Yeah,
unless you want to look like Neo from the Matrix when he first gets out of the thing where he's got no hair. But actually, a public service announcement before I forget too is like one thing people don't think about when they're stopping to take selfies in front of the fire and everything else. There's probably also going to be guys with drones up there too, bombing around to take a good look at the fire. Yeah. So in order not to hit helicopters and maybe the drone that the fire department's using or anything else, don't send your personal drones up to check out the fire.
Yeah, and I think in Canada, I think is it 5 kilometers? I think you have to be minimum 5 kilometers away from an emergency scene. So yeah,
so unless it's like shit hit the fan, there's no responders around, and if you want to see where the forest fire is compared to your house, and there's like nobody flying, okay, sure, but in reality, it's like no.
But they actually, that's funny you mentioned that, because on the fire on Saturday, they had to put up a notice on social media for people with recreational drones to not fly in the area, because people were, and they were getting pictures and posting them on Facebook in real time, and they realized, guys, these are drones flying near the 3 helicopters that we have. And I mean, it doesn't matter what size. I mean, if a helicopter hits a drone with its tail rotor or anything, it could be it for that helicopter, right?
Well, if a Canada Goose can literally take down an airplane, no problem, because it's just a weight versus relative speed. So if the helicopter's doing like 60 knots, even like just same speed as a car, and hits a 2-3 pound drone, that's
could put it through the windshield. It could hit the rotors, and that's the end of it, right? So, don't fly your drones near these things. Even when our fire department drone was up, was only when the helicopters were gone for the day. So they were not putting up our drone when the helicopters were up at all. So,
Yeah, I just can't believe like the helicopters weren't able to drop water because the guys were taking selfies in front of the fire.
Well, and that's the thing is, I mean, we had the helicopter pilots were screaming on the radio to get people off the highway, and we didn't realize at this point that people were stopping, getting out of the vehicles, crossing the highway in the heavy smoke, not understanding if vehicles were coming or not, to get pictures of the fire, and the helicopters pilots couldn't drop the water because where the vehicles were parked and where the beginning of the woods were probably only about 50 feet. And, understanding that these helicopters are operating at like 500-600 feet in altitude, they've got 500 gallons of water and they're going to drop it, and that's 5,000 pounds. If you drop it on a vehicle, it'll flatten the vehicle. If you drop it on a person, it'll probably kill the person. So they weren't able to effectively do their job because people were just taking pictures. So
Crazy.
Brutal.
Yeah. Get off the highway. And the worst is, I mean, at this point, we were in the process of shutting down the highway and cars are driving through the smoke. And it was like one of these things you see in NASCAR, like, you've got this big, heavy fire and smoke. You can't see what's on the other side. You're going through this going like 200 miles an hour. Obviously, they were only about 60 miles an hour, but like they were going through the smoke at 60 miles an hour, not understanding what was in the smoke or what was beyond the smoke.
Still faster than the reaction time.
Baffled. Just yeah. It's like going through the clouds without radar or anything. Like just you know, F it. It's just there's something there. There's something there, right? Like so. Yeah, it's crazy.
We had one question from Tim, listener Tim. I don't know if you saw that or not, Hugues, but maybe it's an OPSEC thing for you as well. I think we covered it in a previous episode as well. It's can you leave your trailer loaded?
Leave the trailer loaded? That's a really good question. I would prefer not to because so I thought about it because I mean if I could leave it loaded, I could leave it locked, and then it would take me a few minutes to load up the trailer and go. But I think that I can't really control the environmental variables within the trailer, which means it gets really hot in the summer and really cold in winter. And a lot of those items I think would not fare well with those conditions. So there's that. And then the other piece is that if somebody drives down my driveway and hooks up to the trailer, I don't care what kind of lock you have on it. I mean, it's just going to slow people down, right? But if they steal that trailer, they're literally making away with probably $10,000, $20,000 worth of stuff, right? So OPSEC wise, I'd rather have that in the house. It's a bit more of a struggle for them to get to, but it's something, Tim, it's a great question. It's something I've struggled with because it would cut down on the time greatly, but also I use that trailer for carrying around ATV, getting anything that can't fit in my truck, which if I had to unload it and load it every time, I think I would do it once and really realize I don't want to do this again.
Yeah, if we all had unlimited resources, we'd probably all have a Humvee with a loaded trailer in the shed and the heated shop ready to go at a moment's notice. But
idling at all times, ready to go. Yeah.
Yeah, and Tim did mention, I'm assuming it's enclosed. Yeah, it is enclosed. It's 6x12 enclosed. It's got barn doors in the back, a side door. I can padlock it shut. I can lock it as well. But it's just, I think, just the environmental aspect that I can't control. And then obviously, if somebody were to back up and hook up, they're making away with $10,000-$20,000 worth of stuff. So
well, it decapitates your preps too, right? Like if it's the primary stuff you want to take with you, it's probably your most valuable or valuable to you preps, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Anyway, cool.
Yeah. Any other questions from the panel or anything else you want to toss in, Hugues?
No, I think this is a really good topic. I think it was really well timed as well, obviously. And I think for me at least, it was an eye opener because again, I'm somebody who's very process driven. I've got lists, I've got procedures for a lot of stuff. I've got a lot of preps. I mean, if you gave me 60 minutes, not a problem. Trailer would be loaded, everything would be hunky dory, and I could leave the house understanding it. If the house is gone, we're just going to get a new house. But 5 minutes was really an eye opener, and I never thought it was really possible. I knew that there had been forest fires in the area before, but never when I lived here. So I'd never lived through that. And I think you almost have to live through it to really understand that, you may only have 5 minutes. And if that's the case, it really kind of handcuffs you as to what you can take with you. So obviously it's going to be your kids, the cat, probably an iPad or a laptop. So you have something to do when you're, sequestered in a hotel for 3 months as they rebuild your house. But yeah, so it really changes the game, I think.
All right.
Cool. Podcast challenge time?
I think so.
All right. So the best I could come up with this week was try to put together a small bag of critical items that would allow you to leave with zero notice in the ideal world. So when I say small, I don't mean like, a 72-hour, like 511 pack. I mean like small, like that would just hold you like a personal files, like a little jump drive full of stuff. something that's anybody in the house can grab. If it's just like, hey, grab the red bag and we're on your way, like just because that's the absolute critical stuff you don't want to lose behind, whether it be the 1,000 pictures jump drive or whatever.
Yep.
So
Awesome.
yeah, it's pretty easy podcast challenge to do. I think just to break out your iPhone and go crazy.
I think so. Upcoming events.
All right, so just one now. We've got TACOM Canada 2020, September 11th to 13th, and the Canadian Pro Gun Podcasters Network will be in attendance at TACOM 2020. Your favorite podcasters will be on hand throughout the show, assuming it's not canceled. So make sure you stop by the booth to meet your favorite and pick up some swag. You can see the details for the show at the ticket link here, and that also gives us a bit of a kickback if you follow that link to buy your tickets. A couple of quick things with that. We should have Fred here on within the next month or so. I'm just going to start making contacts with him on that one. And sounds like they're going to try and I don't want to go with there, but they're going to try and do some fundraising for some CCFR stuff down the road, but I have to get more details on that. But anyways,
nice.
Yeah. So that's all we have for now. TACOM Canada.
Awesome. All right, let's move into some shout outs.
It's me again. Traveling Prepper, who showed me what having a mag really means, which was great when I was out in Alberta looking at the property. He was more than helpful. And listener Steve for the ham radio connection. That was awesome. Within, just by putting it out in the podcast here, within like a day, I had connections to an extremely local ham radio examiner.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so it was great.
Yeah, I had just want to shout out to Main Street Pizza here in Star Prairie. I mentioned them earlier. Just a simple Facebook post last night, and the community came together, and they were able to drum up a bunch of supplies. Like I said, they donated 3 full 7-passenger vans and a pickup truck to the community of St. Paul, Minnesota, and those in need there. So
awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Any shout outs for you, Hugues?
Nope, I'm good.
All right, moving to email and iTunes reviews. So the feedback at prepperpodcast.ca email address is very lonely as per usual. So nothing there. Unfortunately, I've checked it a few times. We're still getting those job applications. I am still not opening them. My computer is still not crypto locked because I'm not opening them. However, we have got a few more iTunes reviews. So we're up to 54 5 stars, 5 4 stars, 3 2 stars, and 1 2 star. And then that one little guy at 1 star still keeping us honest. So thanks for the reviews. Keep sending them in. We appreciate it.
And you're still looking for topic ideas if anybody has something we want to discuss.
Please send them in.
Break your OPSEC and don't worry about it. We won't return you in just for emailing the show. It's okay.
Nope.
We're preppers too.
There are ways to send it in anonymously. Check out the darknet and email addresses.
Proton mail, all that stuff.
Proton mail, all that fun stuff. We accept that as well. You don't got to give us a name or anything to pose the question, and we'll happily talk about it. So I guess with that, I will bring episode number 70 of the Canadian Prepper Podcast to an end. You can find the podcast on iTunes, Podbean, Spotify, or of course your favorite podcast app. Please help us out. Submit a review to help other people find us.
And we record these shows live on Facebook and YouTube. If you want an early peek at the show, please subscribe to YouTube channel Canadian Prepper Podcast and click on the notification tab. That gives you alerts of when we're going live. And for myself, I can be reached at hfxprepper@gmail.com or Hugues@prepperpodcast.ca. And I've also got my own YouTube channel. Just search for HFX Prepper.
Yeah, if you got any questions or advice for me, go ahead and email into the show at tyler@prepperpodcast.ca.
All right, you can reach Ian directly by emailing me at theislandretreat@gmail.com. And you can also find me on Canadian Patriot Podcast on iTunes and YouTube, recording there on Monday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern. There you can find me discussing why government waste makes you want to change provinces.
It's changed again. Mm-hmm. All right, so please check out Rapid Survival. It's rapidsurvival.com. You can get me there in the live chat while you're buying some prepper gear. You can also email me at feedback@prepperpodcast.ca. Again, the inbox is pretty empty, so please verify that it's working. Send me some emails. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, be prepared, stay safe.
And taxation is theft. Nope, wrong podcast. Keep learning.
It is theft, though.